Let me welcome you here to one in a series of evening forums that is being sponsored by the Achievement Gap Initiative at Harvard. The topic today is the Abbott Districts in New Jersey. The Abbott Districts are a story that some people know a bit about, but lots of folks don't. I was not very familiar with their story until very recently. It turns out, though, that they are probably more than any place else in the country the example that people are likely to point to several years from now to say, look, that's what happens when poor districts get lots of money. You'll hear in a while that the Abbott districts on average now have more spending than the suburban districts in the state of New Jersey. And I think the future perspective on the degree to which money can foster improvement in public education, particularly in low-income districts, will hinge to maybe a substantial degree on the extent to which the Abbott districts succeed with their resources. And so I think we all need to be rooting for them and trying hard to understand what their experience is so that we can all learn from it as they go along. The Achievement Gap Initiative at Harvard is still in a very early stage, but our aspiration is to bring research and practice together in order to contribute to raising achievement for all kinds of kids, but especially kids from disadvantaged backgrounds and from Latino and Native American and African American backgrounds. And so we're trying to understand as best we can what people are experiencing out in the field as they try to pursue these types of goals and to help bring research to bear so we can all together learn and experience some success, because it makes a huge difference to the society that by the time whites are a minority, that we are at a place where race and ethnicity are not strong predictors of outcomes in school or in the society at large. If we don't get there, things do not bode well for the society at large. And we've got a couple generations to work on it, and I think the work in the Abbott districts will be an important piece of that work over the next several decades. Let me introduce our speakers, and I'm always hesitant to read all the way through a resume, but I haven't memorized them well enough to sit back and summarize, so I will read them. Gordon MacInnes joined the New Jersey State Department of Education as an assistant commissioner in February 2002. He organized a new division to combine in one place the departmental responsibilities growing out of the historic Abbott v. Burke litigation, and to oversee the three state takeover districts, Newark, New Jersey, and Paterson. The objectives of the division are to place relentless focus on early literacy and mastery of the New Jersey curricular standards, and on the efficient delivery of instructional services in each of 31 Abbott districts. From 1970 to 1978, Mr. MacInnes was the founding CEO of the Fund for New Jersey, a grant-making foundation that concentrates on public policy advocacy. He served as the CEO of the New Jersey Network, the state's public television network, from 1978 to 1983. From 1974 to 76, Mr. MacInnes was a member of the New Jersey General Assembly, and from 1994 to 98, he was a member of the New Jersey State Senate, where he served on the Education Committee. He is the author of Wrong for All the Right Reasons: How White Liberals Have Been Undone by Race, which was published in 1996 by NYU Press. From 1999 to early 2002, Mr. MacInnes was the president of Citizens for Better Schools, which concentrated on training potential superintendents and principals, supporting charter schools, and shifting implementation of Abbott to focus on student achievement. Mr. MacInnes served as director of the Hunt Corporation from 1970 until its sale in 2001, and as its non-executive chairman in 1995 to 1996. He is a graduate of Occidental College and the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University. And he's married to Blair Bartow MacInnes, and they are the parents of 3 adult sons, and he resides in Morristown, New Jersey. Let me also introduce Fred Carrigg before we have them come up. Fred Carrigg is Special Assistant to the Commissioner for Urban Literacy in New Jersey. In this position, he serves as Senior Administrator in the Abbott Division for advice on successful literacy policies and works specifically with the 31 Abbott districts in the state on curriculum and instruction policies and programs to improve urban education. And I also know you work with districts beyond the Abbotts, which isn't mentioned here. His responsibilities include oversight of the Abbott-mandated intensive early literacy program in grades pre-3 to 3, that should be pre-K to 3, and on the literacy is essential to adolescent development and success middle grades initiative. As the New Jersey Director of Reading First from 2002 until December 2003, he coordinated the state's effort to restructure reading programs in the most impoverished districts and comply with federal regulations for the implementation of Reading First in New Jersey. From 1989 to 2002, Fred was the Executive Director for Academic Programs in Union City, New Jersey, a highly urbanized city located on the New Jersey side of the Lincoln Tunnel. His responsibilities included the supervision of the development and implementation of curriculum for all programs pre-K through 12. Consistent with his other responsibilities was the infusion of the ubiquitous use of technology in the district, which has led Union City to be cited as a national model for seamless integration of technology into the daily curriculum. He also supervised the district's Road to College program and several NSF initiatives to improve the enrollment of underrepresented minorities in colleges and universities. Union City has 11,600 students, of whom 93% are Hispanic and 3,000 represent recent immigrants enrolled in the district's bilingual ESL program. Fred served as bilingual ESL supervisor for 12 years. Prior to that, he taught bilingual 8th grade and ESL Spanish and reading at Union. Prior to that, he taught bilingual 8th grade and ESL Spanish and reading at Union Hill High School in Union City. Fred has a BA in Foreign Languages from Montclair State and an Ed.M. in Intercultural Education from Rutgers University. We're going to have Gordon speak first and give you the context from a state perspective and talk a bit about the history of the Abbotts. And then Fred is going to come up and talk about the Union City District and the attempt to take the Union City experience and use that as the foundation for how the state approaches Abbott implementation to try to raise achievement across the rest of the state in some of the ways that they have succeeded at doing so in Union City. So without any more hesitation, let's bring Gordon up.
Thank you. Good evening. It was good afternoon, but those introductions took so long, I figured I'm going to add that to my resume that particularly for settings like this, that I'm also the grandfather of 5 grandchildren under the age of 4, and that makes me now an expert on early brain development, and particularly among the smartest, most beautiful kids on earth, so, and I won't go on about that. My normal primer on Abbott runs about 75 minutes. Professor Ferguson asked that I cut that back a bit, and I promised to do that, and he's been very good about enforcing some discipline.
We've done this twice already today. We did a lunch seminar, and he came to my class, so I've trained him fairly well.
I'm going to spend a very few minutes describing the legal background for Abbott, which may or may not be accepted by the plaintiff's lawyer in this case, if he were here. And then I want to spend also a very few minutes talking about the resources that have been generated for the districts and about the effort that has been underway for the last 4 years to make Abbott answer this question: can you use a Supreme Court mandated increase in resources to close the achievement gap? And that's what we want to do. And Fred will tell you how we're going to do that in the area of literacy, and I'll set the frame for that. Abbott is the second major school finance litigation in New Jersey. Robinson versus Cahill was filed in 1970. It led to 5 different decisions by the New Jersey Supreme Court. On July 1st, 1976, seeing that the legislature was not inclined to shift a large percentage of financing of local schools in poor districts from the property tax to a state revenue source, the New Jersey Supreme Court shut down the public school system in New Jersey. And it remained shut down for about 45 days until the legislature came back enacted an income tax and a new school aid formula, and the court relented and allowed schools to reopen that September. In 1981, Abbott versus Burke was filed. Abbott's the first alphabetically named plaintiff in the case. A class action suit brought in behalf of all of the residents of poor school districts, not well defined in the initial case. Subsequent to 1980, the New Jersey Supreme Court has handed down 14 decisions in Abbott. As you can tell from that, this has been a matter of energetic litigation in defining what is meant by a constitutional education. For most of the time, the court dealt with the issue of financing public schools in districts that did not have vast property wealth and had a lot of poor kids. And they asked successive administrations, beginning with Governors Florio and then Kane and then, can I keep them all straight? Then Whitman, to define as educators what does a constitutional education look like? And for 15 years of litigation, administrations refused to do that. And so the issues were framed entirely in financial terms. Finally, the court, frustrated by this, adjourned the proceedings and called a special master and ordered the Commissioner of Education to answer that question and gave the plaintiffs the equal opportunity to give their version of what a constitutional education would look like. And in 1998, they handed down what is probably the most prescriptive and specific order by a state Supreme Court affecting educational practice that has ever been handed down. They preceded that the year before by issuing its penultimate decision on finance. And it said in 1997 that the state was obligated to freeze property taxes in the Abbott districts for school purposes at the current levels and to calculate the average spending in the 100 wealthiest districts in New Jersey, which happen to fall into a letter category for a schematic design from A, poorest, lowest social economic profile, lowest property wealth, lowest educational average level, lowest household incomes, highest unemployment, etc., to the J's, highest social economic, highest family income, highest education level of the mother. State would calculate under the parity formula the average spending in the I and J districts, New Jersey being the second wealthiest state in the nation and the highest in spending, trading places with Connecticut in both categories from time to time. Those I and J districts spend a lot of money. And they said you must calculate their per pupil spending and then you must match that in the Abbott districts. And when handed down in 1997, it was after the school budgets had been struck and literally the state was in the position of forcing Abbott districts to come up with some pretense for receiving a vast increase in their funding level after their budgets had been set. And that set a tone for Abbott, which I think is borne some ill fruit. The following year, 98, they handed down Abbott 5, which is, as I said, the most prescriptive piece of legislation. In this, they ordered the following, and I'll be very quick to go over this. Public schools education would start at age 3 in the Abbott districts with what the court defined as a high-quality pre-kindergarten program. It must be at least a half day. It must be at least during the school year. It had, under Governor Whitman, it was extended to full day year-round. It must be in classrooms with no more than 15 children, with a teacher with a certification for preschool through 3rd grade, earlier education certificate, a certificate, by the way, that did not exist at the time that the court handed down its order, with a teacher's aide. And it must be carried out in classrooms that are at least 950 square feet. In addition to that, there must be a ceiling on class size of 21 for kindergarten through third grade, of 23 for grades 4 through 6, and of 25 for grades 7 and above. In addition to that, every elementary school must adopt a model of whole school reform from a list of models approved by the Commissioner of Education, drawn from national studies of what were then very hot items in the educational world, which were comprehensive school reform models. And on and on. Every school had to have a technology coordinator. The student-to-computer ratio had to be at least 5 to 1. There had to be a parent liaison in every school. There had to be on and on and on. The court also said that for the first time, the New Jersey State Board of Education, having adopted core curriculum content standards to cover all the grades, K through 12, that the court would employ those standards as the definition for deciding whether children in the Abbott districts were receiving a constitutional education. Their mastery of those standards would be the judge, would be the measure. And they said in this 1998 two other things that relate to resources. The state was responsible for 100% of the financing for any facilities required in the Abbott districts to first make certain that the facilities are healthy and safe. Second, to make certain that the districts provide adequate facilities to launch the new pre-kindergarten program to reach at least 90% penetration of 3- and 4-year-olds in their districts. Third, to reduce overcrowded classrooms to the ceilings that had been set by the court. Fourth, to make sure that every building was adequate, not defined. The second thing that the court did in terms of resources in this decision was to say that parity funding may not be adequate, and districts were free to petition the commissioner for additional funds, and if the commissioner turned down or reduced their request, that they were free to pursue on an expedited schedule within 10 or 12 weeks a hearing before an administrative law judge, before the Commissioner of Education, and then before a panel of the appellate division of the Superior Court, so that a decision would be reached before, can't remember what it is, July 10th or something like that, for budgets struck on June 1st. This has resulted in the Abbott districts receiving 1997, the year that the parity funding was launched, Abbott districts spent about $7,200 a kid, $1997. The IJ district spent about $8,500, $8,600. Actually, it was $8,700, about $1,500 more per child. Last year, Abbott district spent about $14,500. IJ district spent about $12,700. So the court's goal has been achieved, and it's been achieved pretty much every year since parity funding started, and the lead is increasing for the Abbott districts, because during the last 5 years, only the Abbott districts have received any increase in state aid. Given the fact that these districts are responsible for only 22% of all students enrolled in New Jersey public schools, but receive 55% of the state aid budget that is available, this is producing real resentment, particularly in districts that are hard-pressed by rapidly rising enrollments and by property tax wealth that is not keeping pace. The question that we have tried to focus on since 2002 is this. Prior to 2002, the issue was the following. Are you true to what the court determined you have to do? And if you're not, we're going to force you to do it. And if you don't do it, then we'll have litigation to further define the obligations of the state and the districts to ensure that these 35 specific remedies and positions and programs and services that have been mandated by the court are in place in each school. And that the state is financially responsible for all the costs associated with any additions to the programs in the Abbott districts. here are a couple of simple observations. First is there is only one measure that the court established that counts. It's not whether you have a parent liaison in every school. It's whether your kids master the core standards that the state has set and uses as a determination of whether an 18-year-old is educated. Second, whatever happens in Trenton, the state capital, or before the Supreme Court, or in the budget hearings before the legislature, if that does not change what happens between teachers and students in the now 465 Abbott schools in the 31 districts, enrolling a bit over 300,000 students, if it doesn't change that, then we've all wasted our time and our money. And the third thing that seems to me to be a truism is that if our goal is to close the achievement gap, and if our goal is to ensure that children in the Abbott districts end up with the same sorts of life choices that kids from the most affluent districts get, which is what we're talking about, then they all need to be readers and writers of the English language. And they need to do that early, because the odds for kids who do not learn to read and write on grade level by third or fourth grade are very long. I think they're about as long as Belmont's chances of winning the NC2A Final Four this year. I think Belmont plays Duke to start. And if you've heard it, look, that's the point. You have about a 1 in 11 chance of becoming a reader on grade level after the fourth grade if you're not a reader by that time. Those are pretty terrible odds for a 10-year-old. And that's pretty much a life sentence. And so we have concentrated on early literacy. Fred will tell you a lot more about that. And we concentrated on that because it's so obvious that it needs to be done, number one. And number two, we had evidence that it could be done. And the evidence didn't come from scholars, and it didn't come from theorists, and it didn't come from bureaucrats in Washington or ideologues at think tanks. It came from Abbott districts that had high concentrations of poor children who were performing at levels approaching suburban schools. And we wanted to find out why they were doing that. And we wanted to say, here's an example of a district with kids who are poorer than your kids and where they are achieving at what must be considered a dramatic level. And those achievement gains are being sustained and they're being built on. And we wanted to take the habits of those districts and spread them to the other districts. And that meant we wanted to focus initially, relentlessly, to a point of boredom by people who have to hear me speak more than once on early literacy. That was the year 2002. And since that time, we have expanded our relentlessness to encompass middle grades literacy and mathematics in the K-8 years. The fact is that across the nation, NCLB and now all 50 states have determined that we are going to judge our public school systems by whether or not the standards that each state sets are mastered through state assessments. And there's a lot of monkey business in between the cup and the lip on this, really to torture a metaphor or whatever that is, because the standards are so diverse. I must say in New Jersey that I would give them our science standards a B. They're modeled on national science standards. They're parsimonious. They can be accomplished in the time that science teachers are typically given, and they range over to other disciplines where the standards are obtuse or vague or too specific. However, they are what they are, and the standard has been accepted, and standardized measurement by the state has been accepted as the one annual evaluation that we'll use to decide whether public schools are working or not, and particularly in New Jersey, whether Abbott schools are working. And I see that in Ron Ferguson's very large handwriting that I am to sit down. I want to just close with one point about this national enthusiasm for standards, core curricular standards. It is well established now, and as I said, in each of the 50 states, NCLB is based on this premise. In most of the Abbott schools, in the classrooms and in the principal's office, the phrase standards-based instruction has very little meaning, because in most of the Abbott districts, the work that is required, which is difficult work, to translate this large and not always very clear set of statements by the State Board of Education, so that it has clear and concrete meaning for students, parents, and teachers about what you should be, where you should be on March 16th, or during the second week of, in terms of what should be learned, how it will be measured, what do you do with kids who aren't where they should be. All of those questions are a part of a curriculum, and that don't exist in most Abbott school districts, and we're discovering also in a lot of non-Abbott school districts. And so we will talk a lot about standards-based instruction. Our job is to bring that into classrooms in 465 schools and give it meaning and make it effective. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fred, who will describe the transition from Union City to Trenton. Fred? You only get 3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes now? What's that?
Do you want a laser pointer if I get one for you?
I think I'm fine. Okay. I have a PowerPoint so you won't stare at me the whole time. That you look up there once in a while. My job in the next 15 minutes is to talk about Union City Public Schools, where I spent 30 years of my professional life, from classroom teacher to being in charge of curriculum instruction for the district for 13 years, before I came over to the Abbott Division in the fall of 2002, where I have the single assignment of scaling up the success of Union City Public Schools to the 454 Abbott schools in the state, and to talk to you a little bit about where we are in that process and how we are attempting to do it. So I'm going to begin with that being the challenge itself. Can you take something that has worked at the district level and actually convert it into state policy and have that same level of success? A little bit on Union City itself. It is one of the most densely populated cities in the nation. It's located on the New Jersey side of the Lincoln Tunnel. It is more like a neighborhood in New York City than really representative of most of the state of New Jersey. There are 67,000 residents in 1.4 square miles. According to the 2000 census, it was the most densely populated city in the United States. You're looking at a main street in the district. It's only 48 blocks long, 5 avenues wide. That's the entire city. But we do, to give you an idea of the density of population, we have a school every 4 blocks. Downtown Edison School in Union City until 2005 had 1,890 students in a K-8 school covering a 10-block area. To give you an idea of the density of population in the district. When I left in the fall of 2002, there were 11,625 students. I think there are about 12,000 now. It's 93% Latino, 95% minority. We do a home language survey in the state of New Jersey, and parents self-report. 75% of our parents reported that they do not speak English at home, and I think some people would contest the 25% that argued that they do speak English at home. I would say it's probably higher than that. 1/3 of all students are in the bilingual ESL program, 14% in the country less than 3 years. It is clearly a very poor area. 87% receiving free or reduced lunch, and 30% below the official poverty level. The student population, this is to give you a slight idea, currently it is among the many minorities, the largest group are Dominicans, constitute about 35% of the population, heavily concentrated downtown, but it really is a complete mixture among Spanish-speaking people, from the Andean, Ecuador, Colombian, Peruvians, who are very different from folks from El Salvador and Honduras and Panama. So it's a very diverse but homogeneous in that everybody speaks Spanish. So the story is this. In 1989, I was bilingual ESL director. State law, 1986, there was a takeover law for districts that were failing to improve. Union City was among the first 5 districts that the state began to investigate in a process that took you through 3 levels before state takeover. Those 5 districts were given a matter of about 5 months to write a 5-year plan to demonstrate to the state that you had the resources and commitment from within not to be taken over by the state. 2 of those 5, Hoboken and Union City, were not taken over by the state. The other 3 were. We were one of the 2 that were not taken over. Within 6 years, New York Times came in and on their op-ed page, we're very proud of it, ran a full column calling Union City a model for urban education, followed shortly thereafter by the Wall Street Journal, who came in and followed up that investigation and made the same declaration just a few months later. The point of having that here is we so often hear that it takes 10, 12, 15 years, and actually if you're talking about K to 12, that may be true, but you can change things in a short period of time at the elementary level and begin to build for that long-term change. And we need to think about education as a primary experience, the middle grades and high, and not just a K to 12. By 2003, the district had the highest scores in math and language arts in the states for cities, Abbott cities with populations over 50,000. So this goes back to the beginning. What were our guiding principles in the change in Union City, which is pre-Abbott? This is 1989. The first one is the most difficult. And that was an understanding that we needed a broad consensus among all the stakeholders, teachers, administrators, community members, that all students can learn. And that sounds very simple, and my life experience tells me that's the hardest thing to achieve. That is not simple at all. My personal experience with this is originally when Union City changed, it was mostly a Cuban town. Vast numbers of Cubans arrived there after the fall of Castro. By the 70s have become a majority, and they are also a distinct group. And as Cubans left Union City and were replaced with Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and Colombians and others, we ran into a fundamental problem with teacher perceptions and low expectations of the new immigrants. And that became a fundamental problem to deal with, where they said these kids are different, these kids aren't the same, these kids can't make it. You know, the Cubans had this advantage and that advantage. And the only plan we came up for dealing with that, because you cannot give people research, you can't stand up and lecture, you can't convince them, none of that works. The only thing that does work is to succeed. And when you succeed, and they see that these children can learn to read, and these children can acquire all the same skills and knowledge base as any other child, then the attitudes begin to change. So it's success breeds success. And it is part of that I brought to the state, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. The design of the programs need to be tailored to the local condition. And again, this was a 1989 decision in Union City, where we felt that the national programs and textbooks and materials we were buying had nothing to do with the student population and the children we were working with in Union City. There was an immediate disconnect from buying national basils that were written for some mythical student in Nebraska who doesn't exist, and we were trying to use in a homogeneous Spanish-speaking community attempting to learn English and become literate by 3rd, 4th grade in English. And we literally got rid of them. We made a decision to get rid of all of those textbooks after investigating them and finding out that they had nothing to do with our students or community, nor did they teach state standards. So we weren't teaching what children needed to learn, plus we were using materials that were not aimed at or useful to our existing community. And we literally rewrote the curriculum, a process that began in 1989 and continues to this day. We understood that reform would take a long time, and that we needed, and we set a plan, a 5-year plan, but we revised that plan every single year. And the efforts that went into that revision continue to this day. It has not stopped at all. The thinking at the time was that you would write a curriculum and then that would be in place for 4 or 5 years, and then you'd come back and revisit it. In fact, that was state rule and regulation, and it's why we started with a 5-year plan. We quickly discovered that that was ridiculous, that you needed to review, revise, immediately make changes, and every single year build on those changes. We were one of the first districts to make a full and complete commitment to curriculum revision, and it has become a strength in the district. Continuous communication between policymakers and implementers, and this goes with the next one, effective implementation requiring ongoing support for teachers. We established a primary literacy committee in 1989 and did something that was very unusual. Out of the 14 members, 11 were teachers. So instead of having a curriculum dictated from central office that teachers had no input into, to demonstrate that this was truly different, we established a literacy committee, gave it authority to set policies, and made it majority teacher. And one of the advantages to that is we immediately had buy-in. Also on that committee, we, for the first time, included groups that had been excluded from the process. Before 1989, in Union City, the general education program bought a curriculum, and all the other programs would be told to adapt to that curriculum. I was one of those other programs, the bilingual ESL. So we'd be presented with a general education program curriculum and told now we need to adapt to get there. I changed that in 1989 and included bilingual ESL, special ed teachers, compensatory teachers from the outset on that original committee. You have to remember that in Union City, even in 1989, only 6% of the students were from English language background homes. And that they were setting the curriculum for the other 94%, which was an absurdity. Some of the things we changed around. So this is a real quick slide to talk about what that change looked like. We moved from a traditional curriculum, very typical in the 80s and 90s, based on basils and textbooks, lots of rote going on, to an inquiry-based authentic curriculum built at home with lots of children's literature and authentic materials. We went from traditional periods, most of you probably have had that experience, where you have language arts for 35 or 40 minutes, a bell goes off, and then you go to reading, and Bluebird, Yellowbird, and a bell goes off, and maybe you had writing. We got rid of that in 1989 and created blocks of time for integrated language arts. And by 1992, we had added social studies to that, so we had a full half day of uninterrupted humanities instruction of an integrated curriculum. We had labs, as Gordon described, most Abbotts do, but we moved to classrooms with computer centers, again, well ahead of what is currently the norm, so that by 1993, all classrooms in Union City, 4th through 8th grade, had a computer center, 4 to 6 computers. And by 1994-95, they were all connected to the internet, which is another story on the use of technology in Union City. We went from central office, downtown management to the inclusion of school-based, from very limited professional development to a continuous professional development plan, very similar to the coaching models that are widespread today, very limited parental involvement, through an invention of ours called Parent University, to a tremendous increase of community involvement into the schools. The data, which I'm going to run through very quickly, it's pretty big up there, you can see it. Begin in 1999, see the district had 44% of its 4th graders general education program passing the state test. The state at that point in time had 62%. It was the first year of the test. DFGA stands for the poorest districts in the state, and there are about 53 districts in that category, and Abbott is a subset pretty much of that category of 31. So those are your comparisons. And you'll see by 2003, we had closed the gap between Union City and the state average, with 86% of our students passing at the 4th grade level, with a state average of 90%. And without spending time on it, you'll also see that we had some real dramatic and systematic improvements that occurred in math at the same time. To finish the chart, I went in and pulled out the last 3 years to show you that those gains have been sustained at the 4th grade level. In fact, there's literally no gap between the performance of a general education student in Union City Public Schools and the state average. And at the same time, you will note at the bottom, and I'll come back to that later, that in general, conditions are improving in the Abbott districts as a whole in the state in 4th grade. But we believe the real test is that that 4th grade performance is sustained through the middle grades, because lots of places in the last 50 years have had short-term improvement at elementary levels that don't seem to deliver into the middle grades. One of the things that makes Union City unique, and I highlighted it in red, is you'll see that that is continued through the middle grades in Union City, and in fact the general education program students in Union City outscore the state average in 8th grade. So it is a continuing and building and sustained effort in the district, and the same phenomena that we experienced at the lower grades in math is also true at the middle grades in math in Union City. That improvement has followed there. At the high school level, as these students arrived, the reason it says there's no data, 1997, is that so few kids went to college, the counselors didn't even bother to collect data on who went on. As these students came up from the elementary grades, things changed at the high school. And we began to collect data, and we began to have a lot of students go on to college. And we started a program called Road to College that Ron mentioned, 1998, and we started not only looking to get our students in colleges, but to get them into the top colleges in the nation. That became our goal. And we began to collect information and data on who got into Tier 1 and Tier 2 schools. And many students from that period in Union City have gone on to Ivy League schools, including Yale, 2 here to Harvard from this group of students, Brown, etc. And we're all very proud of that. And this is some of the things that took place at the secondary level. And there's a lot here, and I guess I'll only spend about 30 seconds on it. But what I'm going to say at the secondary level is it was not just the maintenance of academic rigor. There was a lot more that went on at the secondary level to re-engage kids who had lost the interest or did not believe that school could make a difference. And these are some of those programs, and it began in 1999. We established a Humanities Scholars Program that took exiting sophomores and juniors in Union City and sent them to live at colleges over the summer, at local colleges, to get that experience, to get them out of the city so that they would have an idea, because overwhelmingly, like 98% of the parents of students in Union City had not gone to college. It's a very small percentage. Did not even know what the experience was. In science and math, we began to send students who served as research interns at Rutgers University, Bush campus, took courses, participated in programs. Technology was extremely big in our district, and it became another road for students to become involved. They built web pages, went into Manhattan, worked in the dot-coms, worked in technology. And at the bottom, you kind of see the potential pool of students and how many students were involved in these different programs. Now moving to the state. So we have something that has worked in a very finite area, number 11 schools. Can you move that to state policy? In many ways, the Abbott districts are less minority, less poor, than Union City. We have 3 critical programs at the elementary level: Reading First, Intensive Early Literacy, and now the LEADS model for middle grades, that we could use to set policy for the Abbott districts. So these are some of the areas. We looked at the Union City experience, and we looked at our programs, and what can you put into policy and what can't you? Well, I'll give you one you can't. You can't put into policy that all teachers and stakeholders and community members will believe beginning tomorrow that all children can learn. I can say that, but there's really no way I can quantify it, no way I can measure it, etc. But you can put structures in the policy, and we did. So those blocks that worked so well in Union City, we made them state policy. Every primary student would have 90 minutes. Every bilingual ESL student, every student with disabilities would get 120 minutes of literacy instruction. That you can put into policy and measure. We put into policy that every single classroom in New Jersey would have at least 300 authentic titles beyond the reading books, so that when children learn to read, they had something to read. You can't force parents to buy children's literature and put it in their homes. You can encourage them, but I can insist that every single Abbott classroom have 300 titles and send in people to measure that they're there. Assessment and testing, we put in policies that all children must be screened beginning in kindergarten for reading difficulties and then screened 3 times annually. We can put into policy that there have to be summative tests in reading, so that districts know how they're doing and how well their curriculum is helping students. We put into policy that there must be language assessments. Put into policy that for the bottom 5th of all students, that they should get further diagnostic tests in reading, so that we do away with the comment, so typical among elementary teachers, that so-and-so has a reading problem. You see, you can't do anything with that. But when they say so-and-so has a trouble decoding, now I can do something. So-and-so has trouble with sight vocabulary, now I can do something. So testing and assessment of children early is very important to turn reading into a science and not just a general statement. That has gone very well at the state level. Compensatory and supplemental services we actually moved away from after-school programs, remedial programs, and have a rule that you can measure that compensatory and supplemental services should take place during the school day through the provision of a co-teacher into the classroom to reduce class size. Because we know the research says children learn in small groups when they have immediate contact with a literate adult. So we have moved money from remedial and after-school programs and summer programs to the daytime by having a co-teacher present. Continuous professional development, I'm moving ahead because I see the time. Population served, very important that this is for all children, including bilingual ESL, including special ed. All these rules and regulations are for all children. They are not second-class, passed-down materials and supplies, but get the same access to high-quality materials as the general education population, have the same rules for structure, curriculum, and co-teachers. One of the hardest things for people right now, but they're getting used to it, is that special ed teachers who have 14, 15 kids who are in age 9 to 12, which is allowable, and then they end up with 11 reading groups. In the past, didn't get a co-teacher. Well, that's the number one person who needs a co-teacher, because there's no way anybody is doing 11 reading groups and individualizing a program, that many levels. You would never do that in general ed. Never go beyond 3 or 4. We provided coaches. So what's happened? These programs and rules and regulations pretty much went into effect in fall 2003, and in just 2 years, we've had a 10% gain in the Abbott Districts statewide. We've had a 17% improvement among English language learners. Reading First, which is a subset, has similar gains. Here is the data chart for those 3 years. The state of New Jersey as a whole has pretty much been flat, has a 4% gain. However, Abbott constitutes 22% of that state population with a 10% gain, so essentially is accounting for the entire gain in the state of New Jersey, has been in the Abbott, in the city schools. In general education, you can see the state gain just flat, 2%, 9% gain in Abbott. LEP has improved across the state of New Jersey, actually teaching them to read. Special ed remains the area that we have the most work to do. It has improved, but the gap between the Abbott districts and the state is totally unacceptable. It is the major effort this year and continuing into next year. An additional $5 million has been set for that, and we now have approximately 65 special ed literacy resource coaches that we're getting out to those districts. And there you go, within 20 minutes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is a microphone set up on each side of the room, and it is open now for people to ask questions or make comments.
Was that dead man?
Pardon?
That's a good question. He was a techie.
Well, if no one else, well, I'll get things started. It's good to see you again, Fred. Just in general,
Maybe tell us who you are when you go to the
I'm
mic.
Glenn Kleiman. I'm here at Tugsy and at EDC. I've had the pleasure of working with Fred before. One thing I know a number of the students here would be very interested in, Fred and Gordon, is the ways in which you find NCLB legislation to be useful to you in these initiatives and the ways in which you find it to create barriers or problems.
Important question. I would say that while there is a not very well disguised ideological agenda to NCLB, which is to show that public schools don't work, that so far that I have to say that NCLB has been very helpful to what we are trying to do, because it is universal and it does focus attention on the subgroups that have been largely ignored, and in some cases in sort of immoral ways. And I think particularly of special education kids who have been, I'll give you a quick example. I ask districts, we have at least an annual meeting with each district, and we present them with our disaggregated data and our regression analyses. We compare kids who have identical characteristics on the test bubble sheet and across the state, so we can say to districts, well, look at this. They always want to say, well, our kids are poor. They're black and Latino. What do you expect? Or they're special education. What do you expect? We can show them, well, other people who have the identical kids are doing much better than you are. And there's a reason. And we have to find out what that reason is. So my quick view is that NCLB thus far is largely positive. I think the difficulty with it, among the difficulties with it, is the worshipful attitude towards standardized testing and the manipulation that is possible within that state to state, so that we're not really getting much of a fair view of, in fact, how students are doing. And the cutoff scores are being reduced and lowered. And so you have these remarkable differences state to state. The state of Michigan has very, very few schools that are in need of improvement, and we've got most of our schools in need of improvement. And so it's not to be trusted as a national measure, but I think within the states it gives people valuable information.
Just very quickly, one positive, one negative. The positive is the spotlight on special ed, LEP students, ethnic, linguistic, racial subgroups. The negative that I experience all the time is going into districts and trying to talk about real reform that's meaningful and can be sustained, and running into hysterical administrators who want to deal with what is known as the cuspis students. You know, that group of students who are just 3 or 4 points from passing, and put their efforts into that small group to just get over the AYP passing mark.
Are you headed to the mic? Okay.
How much bang do you think the state overall and these Abbott districts are getting out of this preschool bump? Has anybody looked at whether that's creating a big bump for the state across? And how is implementation going for that, given the strictness of what the courts demanded?
Good. It's an excellent question. The court, and I love answering it, the court ordered universal preschool in these Abbott districts, and it also ordered that the districts would accept as a contractor any daycare center licensed by the Department of Human Services as a daycare center for a program that was supposed to be a high-quality preschool program, and we have now almost 500 providers licensed by the DHS who are serving about 65% of the kids who are enrolled in the pre-kindergarten program. We have moved in the last 4 years from serving about 50% of those kids to serving about 73% of those kids. We have set in motion I think, an exemplary program of professional development aimed at improving quality. And my mission statement in preschool borrows from the real estate play, which is location. Ours is quality, quality, quality. And we've concentrated on that. We have done that by setting up master teachers in each district who are responsible for classroom coaching and mentoring and service to every teacher. There are international measures. ECHRS is one of them. I think it's broadly accepted. We've seen a significant improvement in the quality of what happens in our Abbott classrooms. We have seen a significant increase in measures of kindergarten preparation. And I think, therefore, we will see a very large benefit as the cohort that began comes through. The first cohort of 3-year-olds in 1999, 80%, 90% of it were in preschool, were in daycare providers, effectively. The quality had not been addressed. It was the first year. And only about, I think it was about 17,000 of the 55,000 eligible 3- and 4-year-olds were enrolled that year. The impact, therefore, on the 4th grade test that was taken in 2005, which would include those 3-year-olds from 1999, I think is de minimis. I think it will start, I think we'll begin to see much greater impact as we move forward. The other problem is that the record keeping and the enrollment forms were not uniform, And we therefore do not have an accurate record of what 9-year-olds were in the 3-year-old program in 1999. That's a big problem. And so our ability to track back is limited. We introduced a uniform enrollment form 3 years ago. That was one of the first things we did.
Answer from my Union City experience and then what I see going on at the state level in the Abbott Ks in first grades now. Before I left Union City in the fall of 2002 to come to the department, we had to completely rewrite, and it's the last thing I did in Union City, completely rewrite our kindergarten curriculum because it began with phonemic awareness and alphabetic principle, and even by 2001, 2002, we had to rewrite that curriculum because children were arriving in kindergarten knowing their sound letters and knowing alphabetic principles. So we switched to beginning to teach reading right away in kindergarten. So that's my local experience in Union City. And on a state level, I'm very optimistic. I see the changes. I see what's happening in kindergarten and first grade. And I honestly believe that that I'll go further out on a limb than Gordon, that there's real impact coming beginning this year and next, and each year even stronger in third and fourth, because children are arriving at kindergarten ready to read.
I'll be quick about it, Ron. Here's what's interesting to me about it. The K-12 educators, the superintendents in most of the Abbott districts still do not accept the pre-K program as a part of the educational effort that they should be overseeing. They still see it as a supervised play opportunity, and with warmth and shelter during the winter, and decent breakfast and lunch programs, but not much more. We have these annual. We talk to each district at least once every year about teaching and learning. We always include early literacy as the starting point. Even in districts where 93% of the kids were proficient on the language arts test. And it's interesting, having held now 140 meetings or something like that, that probably in only 10 of those conversations has a superintendent mentioned that a part of their literacy effort is the preschool program. And until I see more evidence that this is understood and accepted as an important foundation for what happens, I'll be dissatisfied, and so I'll be dissatisfied for a long time, I guess.
Oh, look, a line just where you want it. That's great.
My name is Frank Cruz. I'm in the master's program here, and I have a 3-part question. I thank you for coming today. My education started in the South Bronx, and when I think about how many low-income Black and Hispanic kids from my area are being prepared to go to college, it just gets me very upset. So I'm curious if you could talk three quick things. What do you think are some of the major obstacles that large urban districts are facing in trying to get more students like myself to college? What kind of, in Union City, what kind of unique strengths did you kind of enjoy going into this? For example, you were able to bring in teachers that you wanted and so on. And then finally, what other encouraging movements do you see across the nation that are, having high success with this kind of population that, because I would love to look at those.
3 parts, too complicated for me. The first part, obstacles. Number 1 obstacle is we did such a terrible job of teaching kids how to read. So you got to take care of that. You have to be able to read. And that must be, you have to do a good job of that. And most city schools were not doing a good job. They're doing a better job now. So that's a major obstacle. And I think so many other things stem from that. Overclassification rates in special ed, problems, discipline, so many other things stem from the fact that young people could not read.
Even math scores are hooked to the reading scores.
Yeah, the whole thing is tied. Gordon started with it. You can't write all kids at the age of 10 and expect to have a good school system. some of the major things, and I'm not going to say anything that's not out there in the research. For those students that have been skipped and now have gaps, you have two problems. And it's much more difficult. You have to find a way to re-engage them because now they no longer trust you or believe you. And so there must be motivation and mechanisms that are real, that connect to their lives, to re-engage them in the educational process so that it really does have hope. You know, just saying, don't do it, don't drop out of school, it's so trite and meaningless in rough urban neighborhoods. You have to find a way to re-engage. And that's kind of the programs I was mentioning before, whether it was technology or whether it was research or showing students and actually getting them out of the district and showing them that these skills opened roads to them and could make a difference. And what do I see at a state level? I see at a state level that most urban districts are still struggling with having the foundation, making sure that kids can read, can compute, can do math, and that school is a meaningful experience. And that's why we have so much emphasis at the early grades. I know that's kind of pessimistic message for kids who are currently in high school, but I don't know what you do with a high school kid who's reading on a second grade level. I really don't.
Can I just say that I think there's another obstacle that is very much in the way. 47% of the Abbott kids are now Latino. And 43 are African American. Most of the Latino kids do not go to school in a district like Union City, which is 93% Latino, and where the Latinos own the town now, and where the political pressure is for the schools to perform, and where you have a tight connection between a sensitive politician, the mayor, who controls the school board. Unlike that, most Latinos attend in the Abbott districts are going to schools in districts that are still, by and large, controlled in cities with an African-American mayor, an African-American city council, an African-American school board, African-American management of the school system. The incentives, the political incentives, the public pressures are not the same in those districts. And the knowledge and background of dealing with Spanish-speaking kids is not the same in those districts. They don't know what to do, and they're not under a lot of pressure to do whatever it is that will work. I think that's a very large obstacle, and most Latino kids are now find themselves in districts with those characteristics.
Just mention one other thing. There is also, among blue-collar populations generally, and maybe even more among some Latinos, an ambivalence about whether you really want to push many kids to go to college. Parents worry that kids will outgrow them, will get to a place where they look down on them, and so you don't get the push you need from the parents, and occasionally even the folks at the school are a bit hesitant to separate out those kids who seem most college ready and give them an extra boost and give them some extra supports. It just seems a little elitist, and so they hold back. And the students who are most well prepared don't get the extra boost that they want. So there is an ambivalence. There's several kinds of ambivalence. Ambivalence in communities that don't really empathize as much with the Spanish-speaking populations as they might, and ambivalence even within a student's own home population about supporting that student to rise up and out.
Hi, I'm Adam Sawyer. I'm a doctoral student here at the School of Education. Really enjoyed your panel. And this is a question for Mr. Carrigg about a few questions about Union City. First of all, you spoke of parent involvement, and I'm wondering what specific strategies were employed there and how successful they were. And I'm also interested in, given the number of ELLs in the district, what bilingual education or ESL program models were in place and what criteria were used for the classification of students in those programs. Thanks.
So I'm going to do the second question first. A lot of very unique things. Number one, 1978, the Board of Education adopted a policy that all non-tenured teachers had to get a bilingual or ESL certificate or they would not receive tenure. So when I left Union City in 2002, 80% of all teachers had beyond their primary certification a bilingual and/or an ESL certificate. Language policy, we are unabashed, absolute supporters of native language, learning to read in native language with a rapid transfer to English. It has worked for us. Our preschools operate almost exclusively in Spanish, take care of alphabetic principle for us. We teach the kids to read in Spanish in kindergarten, and by first grade, our kids are reading on grade level in both languages. Very strong supporters of native language. We know that's not so popular in the nation, but by the way, I've taken that to Abbott Rules and Regs with me, and so we have a whole state that is reintroducing native language in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade. Very opposite some of our western states. We'll see what happens. Parent involvement. Prior to 1989, the district did not communicate with parents in the language of the home. There was kind of an expectation that they want to talk to me in English, even though they were 90% Spanish. We immediately changed all that to all communications, even teacher notes had to be in both languages. That sent a message right away. We did a major endeavor called Parent University that went way beyond your traditional ESL or ABE programs. A major effort in teaching the parents to read Spanish, so when they got those notes in Spanish, they could actually read them. We did a lot of Spanish native language reading training for parents. We made major efforts in skill building among the community to bring them in. That is, we taught receptionist skills. We taught people how to get jobs as bilingual receptionists in the community. So we did a lot of things that were really connected to vocational education, as well as things that were connected to the academic education of their children. And we did all of that with the increases in Abbott funding, because the federal money wasn't there. So we essentially took advantage of Abbott and the Quality Education Act, which allowed schools and districts to make the determination originally how those funds were expended, until that was pretty much cut off in the late 90s with whole school reform.
Okay. Nobody else was going to ask the question I was, but I'd rather you ask them.
Hi, I'm Viana Tercios, and I'm a master's student here. I'm actually from an Abbott district, from Passaic. And the data looks very positive, and you talk a lot about long-term long-term outcomes. And I guess one question I'm having is, what does graduation rates, what do they look like with Latinos and black populations in Union City, in the state, compared to the state, compared nationwide? Is that, are we having positive outcomes in that situation?
I'd say at this point there's a lot less evidence there, and that's part of this long-term picture. Since I've been at the state and looking at state data, and Gordon knows this, absolutely appalled at the real dropout rate and what's really going on. Because I was in my own little enclave in Union City, and we were watching it carefully, and we were appalled that we would have about 70 to 72% of our students who actually entered ninth grade complete. And it's difficult. That is fair, because there's a lot of mobility among poor neighborhoods. People do move around a lot, and that's a legitimate statement. But as I look to the state as a whole, I would see 120,000 kids take an 8th grade test, and then only 92,000 take an 11th grade test. And then these same districts would be reporting to you 3, 5, 8% dropout rates. And so you just know it's not true. And how they do it and what happens is, and I learned this by taking a deep look at the data, a lot of kids simply disappear at the end of 8th grade. And you see they've been retained so many times that they turn 16 in 8th, and they never show up for 9th. And so, I mean, I could name them, and I will not, but certain cities where literally half of the African American males disappeared between 8th and 9th grade, and 40% of the Latino girls would disappear between 8th and 9th grade. That's what I found. The highest rates were those two groups, African American boys disappearing and Latino girls disappearing. So they never even show up for 9th grade. That to me is kind of my answer before. You got to fix it at elementary. You got to make sure they can read. You don't lose them in the middle grades. And now you can talk about careers and what you can do, but you got to be able to read. The basics must be there, or otherwise the kids know it's all garbage. They know you're talking garbage to them.
Right. It's worse than that, and it's an unqualified disaster, and there is no other way to put it. And the state has enabled the disaster by introducing and not overseeing a alternative route to high school graduation. So New Jersey has the highest graduation rates in the nation by quite a bit, actually. 89% supposedly graduate from high school. 20% of them, however, graduate through this special administrative review process that bears no relationship to the core standards which are supposed to govern whether you're eligible for a diploma or not. And so you have a fiction in the state about how we're doing. We track this as closely as we can. The current official means of measuring dropouts is fraudulent and relies on official withdrawal notices that are so it doesn't work, and the disaster in a city like Paterson, where you don't have 60% of the kids who take the 8th grade test in Paterson are not around for the 11th grade test. 60%. And you're going to lose some between the 11th grade test and graduation. So you're talking about a dropout, a melt away of 70% of kids. And there is not, with the exception of Memorial High School in West New York and Union Hill and Emerson High School in Union City, there's not a large high school, a comprehensive high school in the Abbott districts that work, and they don't work that well.
We have about 4 minutes left. I want to ask anybody who wants to ask a question to go to the mic. We'll take all the questions and then respond to all the questions. Okay.
No, I'm off at 7. My contract.
Okay. And we may stay 5 minutes late. Okay.
Hello,
yes,
my name's Lavada. I'm also a student from the Abbott District. I'm from Newark, New Jersey.
I've heard of it.
I'm currently a freshman at the Harvard College. My question is just pretty much based on the standard-based instruction. I'm just curious as to how it's been ensured or tracked that achievement on standards-based, New Jersey standard-based instruction tests equates to national achievement or achievement on the SATs or just achievement in college.
Can we just take everybody and then just, you want to jot down or remember the questions?
What high school did you go to? Where'd you go to high school? Science High, right. I'm going to be my guess. But.
Hi. During your presentation, you mentioned 8 changes made in the Abbott districts, and I would like to know which changes should an administrator focus on if he or she is trying to bring noticeable results, basically on the AYP report within a short period of time. And then I was also wondering if you could briefly speak to, once those changes that you mentioned are in place, how long does it take to demonstrate significant gains, like over 10 points?
Yeah, and could you still introduce yourself? I think we got away from that.
Hi, my name is Vera Johnson. I'm a principal in Boston.
Oh, cool.
Hi, my name is David Rose, and I have to teach a class at 7, so I may not be able to hear the answer, but I'll ask Glenn to tell me the answer later.
You'll be able to podcast it according to the form I sent.
And I think I'm actually almost asking the same question was just asked, but a lot of what you have talked about is very heartwarming and some of it seems to cost money and some doesn't. And I really want to just ask the bang for the buck question. What are the things that have been really important that didn't cost money, and why aren't everybody doing them, of course? Mm-hmm. Some of them just seem to resolve and just knowing something about research and so on. So that's not costly. But then I would love you to say, and what were the things that cost money that actually seem to have the biggest bang for the buck, where, if you've got X thousands of dollars, this is where I'd put my money, okay? Mm-hmm. I'll try to get my answer later, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Mae Weiss, and I run a program that's a Harvard community program with 34 after-school programs. It's the Harvard After School Initiative. My questions will be easy for you to answer, I hope, which is, when we talk about having children reading, did you bring in other services, vision, hearing, dental? Did that fit in? Was the health piece a part of this?
Yes, but not systematically.
Hi, I'm Dara Bloom. I'm also from New Jersey.
What town?
Montclair.
Oh, nice town.
And I actually worked in Newark at a charter school this summer, and they were really big on...
Which charter school?
North Star.
Yeah.
And they were big, my boss was really big on class size, or school size, and
right.
That's something he really stressed, that he didn't think a large school could succeed, and it seems that Union City has disproved that. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little about school size and how you think what things that a big school needs to do to succeed in the way a small school can.
Good. Okay, we go back to this, how the state does against SATs. I mean, is it really a measure of what is more commonly accepted as required for success in college, right? I mean, that if you can succeed in college, you've got the doors open to you, right? And so how do we do on that? And New Jersey has not participated in the national assessments until required to do so in 2004. So we don't have much information on how well we're doing against the NAEP standard. SAT scores are high, rising. Are they as high as they should be for the second wealthiest state in the country? I don't think so. There is anecdotal evidence that a large percentage of those who graduate go on to attend four-year colleges. That is certainly not the case in the Abbott districts. But statewide, New Jersey does pretty well.
Well, if I just, on the same measure, we do have 2 years of NAEP testing, and New Jersey does, fairly well. We also have a significant pool of students, according to NAEP, which separates out reading from writing, which we don't. And that's why there's confusion between state test and NAEP. There are about 15 northern states that assess literacy, which includes writing, whereas most states in the Union separate out reading and writing. So you can't quite equate northern states that include writing and when you look for the comparison, although we do quite well. We're always in the top 10 on the NAEP, et cetera. The thing I want to say about SATs, and this really comes from my road to college days, we do quite well, SATs as a state, and it is also true that we have one of the highest participation rates in the nation. And that's the question you have to ask when you look at state SAT scores. What percentage of seniors are taking these tests? Because you get some states with a decent SAT score, and you find out that 18% of seniors are taking SATs. In Union City, when I left, we had about 76% of our seniors taking the SAT. And we had a very low SAT score. But we had a very, very high participation rate, a lot of hope about getting into college, junior college, et cetera. So a very high participation rate can result in a lower SAT score.
Next question was the most important change of those we've introduced that you would want to see made at the school level, I assume? Well, depends on the school. But I think that overall, the change that I would like to see made most systematically and uniformly and thoroughly is that kids are guaranteed that they're going to be taught what they need to be educated. I think that is not going on systematically, thoroughly, and completely in too many of our Abbott districts and too many of our Abbott schools, and so I continue to concentrate on that. I'm going to give a very quick example about why I believe that. We're not going to get to my goal while I'm still holding this job. My goal is that a kid who's not that when you put those numbers up, and a kid is not classified special education and is not an English language learner, that the number should always be 100% of the kids can read, because that's what we know can happen, and they're all able to be readers. Our number last year was 77% for those kids. That's an impressive improvement from 33% in 1999, and the state added 20 points when it changed the cut score in 2001, but even with that, it's still an impressive improvement. Here's what we knew. The 50%, as Fred just said, we want to know that kids can write. 50% of the 3rd and 4th grade test is writing. It wasn't being taught. If you introduce writing to kids, they'll learn to write. If you teach them to write, they'll learn to write. And you see, and we saw immediately as we would go in and identify that as a problem with the district, train their teachers about how you teach writing to 3rd graders, 2nd graders, 4th graders, we saw an immediate jump in proficiency percentages for like 20 points in short time. When you do the same sorts of changes in math in 7th or 8th grade, you don't get that kind of jump. But if you don't teach kids what they're expected to learn, they will fail. That's another truism as far as I know. It's not one that is widely accepted in enough Abbott schools and districts yet.
Answer very quickly. At the K1 level, how quickly should you expect change? In a year. This is my problem with people saying 10, 12 years. 1 year, because there's no history. You know, they're not disengaged. You're talking about in 1 year doing things correctly, and these kids will be able to read and write and be on grade level. And I offer as evidence, in 2003, there were only 5 Abbott districts in which 80% or more of their general education students passed the New Jersey Ask Language Arts Literacy Test. 5 Abbott districts. Last year there were 17. So that's how quickly you can turn things around when you put in a quality literacy program at the elementary level.
What's the essence of a quality literacy program? I mean, just the 1 or 2 pieces that say...
You need the time on task. It cannot be fragmented, which doesn't make sense to kids. Teachers and administrators need to understand that a reading series is used for instructional purposes to teach children to learn how to read. You do not read reading series. You read children's literature. So you cannot just have reading textbooks. They're boring. They don't mean anything. Nobody cares about them. I use them to teach children how to read. Now I must have authentic reading materials to read that have meaning and message for children.
So you talked earlier, he was talking about teaching the love of learning.
That's
you can
right.
only do that with authentic literature.
That's right.
She wanted to follow up. Can you come to the mic?
Yeah.
We're tape recording and start over.
Okay. I'm the former Reading First director.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, I'm in a Reading First school.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to just use the Reading First materials that we have, that they give us,
Okay.
with the anthology series. And not
Boy, do I understand that, because I'm the former Reading First director for the state of New Jersey. And each state negotiated with the U.S. DOE its model and what it would allow and what it would not allow. And we also must use those same 5 series that you must use in Massachusetts. It's very much dictated by the US DOE. However, we immediately negotiated the classroom library, and that has always been a part of the New Jersey model. We argued that we are a balanced literacy state and that children need to be exposed to authentic literature because that's what we test in New Jersey. We do not test initial consonants and medial vowels. We test whether children can read authentic lit and draw information from it. So each state negotiated with the US DOE its model, and we negotiated from the outset the inclusion of authentic literature. And maybe Massachusetts did too. I don't know.
The next question was what change had was the most expensive that was impactful, right? Was that the guy left, right? So we don't have to answer that question.
We do need to wrap in maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But do answer the question.
Okay. My candidate is that the investment in early literacy, which for most Abbott districts does not require a huge amount of new money because they already have adequate resources and they already have adequate staffing to do the co-teaching and they have the resources to do the screening so that teachers know where kids are and what they need, and they have the money, frankly, to get the classroom libraries. Sometimes you have to supplement it. But it goes, that's where you have to start, and that's where the impact is greatest. For districts that don't benefit from Abbott-type funding, that would be the place to put the money.
Well, that's my candidate for what doesn't cost a lot. It was the same thing, the K-3 reforms. It is a realignment and just doing things differently. My candidate for what does cost a lot of money but it's worth it, preschool.
Oh, the next one was the supplementary health and dental and vision services for, and is that a part of it? Not officially, is my answer. It is encouraged in the court decision. Districts have responded in different ways. There's no template, as they like to say in public education, for exactly how it looks. But I think that we are pretty good on vision screening. I think we're pretty good on dental. I don't know about other things.
No, I'm going to add to that. I'm going to go to the last one, school size, very quickly. We all prefer to have smaller schools because then you can have more intimate relationships between adults and children. I'm going to say, but the reality is that a lot of Abbott districts and cities have very large schools. But then what you do, and what we did do in Union City, is we created very small schools in those very large schools. And to the extent possible, created, first grade wing and second grade wing where the students don't leave that area, etc. So you create within very large buildings very small communities. And the whole idea of restructuring, using personnel to limit the number of adults that young children come into contact with. So it's not 8-10, which is overwhelming, but just 1 or 2, the classroom teacher and the co-teacher who comes into the room. That's part of the ending of pullouts.
And I say that school size does not matter very much. That what matters is relentless attention to teaching and learning and personalized support for all kids. And that sometimes is very difficult in comprehensive high schools, and we have a lot of evidence that doesn't work there. But we've got among our highest performing schools, we've got large, overcrowded elementary schools on the scale that Fred mentioned, and without the facilities that everybody thinks are absolutely necessary. And it seems that kids are lining up, coming from other parts of the town to get into those schools. So I don't think it's I'm not convinced that size matters that much.
I think there are a lot of us who would be willing to sit here for quite a while longer, but we are about 15 minutes past the time we were supposed to start, so I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank our speakers.
Thank you. It was fun. That was fun. Yeah.
Do you have your brother-in-law picking you up?
No, I'm going to get it.